Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Daily Check-In. This is Ned Bellavance, Ned1313 on Twitter, and this is May 4th. May the 4th be with you. 2020, and this is the Daily Check-In. I do this daily live stream every weekday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. So if you're joining me live, awesome. If not, why not? It's right before lunch, a little snack to get you through the day. Why not? Today's topic is going to be OpenShift cluster management, which might not sound super interesting, but I think their approach is interesting. And I'm going to do some compare and contrast with the way that VMware has been going with their multi cluster management scenario. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Before I do that, a couple housekeeping items. One, podcast is going strong. If you would prefer to consume this in an audio format, it's available as a podcast in all of your favorite podcatchers, including Apple Podcast. So just search for Ned in the Cloud and Daily Check-In, and you'll find it, no problem. Second thing, tomorrow is Tuesday, and I am doing a special Terraform Tuesday tomorrow. I think I'm going to do this every week. So if you have questions about Terraform, I'm pretty involved in Terraform, in the world of Terraform. So go ahead and hit me up with questions on Twitter or jump in the chat and let me know what your Terraform questions are. I'm going to try to answer them on Terraform Tuesdays. Finally, the last Friday of every month, I'm going to do an Ask Me Anything Friday. So if you have other questions, just throw them in over the course of the month, either in the comments here. You can do it through Twitter, whatever makes sense for you. And just let me know what your questions might be, and I'll answer them at the end of the month. All right, with that out of the way, let's do our daily check-in. How are you doing? Did you make it through the weekend okay? It was a weird weekend over here. It was a beautiful set of days. I finally ran the Coronathon, or the Corona Marathon, that I was planning to run, which originally would have been the New Jersey Shore Marathon, but that got canceled. And I figured, well, I did all the training, might as well run the marathon. Let me tell you, running one by yourself, it's a little more difficult. There's no cheering crowds. There's no fellow runners to keep you motivated. It's just like you and the trail. Good luck. Maybe that's great for some people. I found it a little intimidating, and I don't think I would do it again. So hopefully running events will become a thing again shortly. So that's my little check-in. Let's talk about the topic at hand, which is OpenShift Cluster Manager. So this was part of the Tech Field Day Extra that I participated in last week. Red Hat did a series of talks for us during the Red Hat Virtual Summit. There were 12 delegates, of which myself was included. And they talked about a number of different topics, but one that I found very interesting was the OpenShift Cluster Manager. OpenShift Cluster Manager comes in two flavors, and so they had two different speakers talking about it. The first was first one was Derek Carr, and he talked about OpenShift Cluster Manager, which you can consume today. It's a SaaS service. It's hosted in Red Hat's cloud, and basically you register your Kubernetes, mostly OpenShift clusters with their service, and then away you go. You can also provision clusters directly from there against one of the cloud providers, or if you have baked your own on-premises, you can hook that local OpenShift instance into the management software. I thought that was pretty cool. And honestly, as as OpenShift becomes more prevalent and Kubernetes becomes more prevalent in different enterprises, you're naturally going to have multiple clusters. Whether it's just different environments, you got your production cluster, your staging, QA, and dev, but also developers tend to like to have their own clusters to play with. If you've got multiple business units, each of those developer groups may want their own OpenShift cluster. But if you have a centralized infrastructure team that's responsible for managing that, especially around like cloud consumption, you really are going to want this sort of centralized management console for all of your OpenShift and Kubernetes clusters. And here is an option. Now, of course, like I said, this is a SaaS option. It's hosted. So the downside to that is it's outside the control of your organization. It's not inside your firewall. You're consuming it from Red Hat. And some people might not be comfortable with that, especially if you're in a regulated industry. So the other option for that was the next presentation, which was Michael Elder. And what he showed us was Advanced Cluster Manager. And Advanced Cluster Manager is advanced in the sense that you can deploy it on-prem, so you don't have to worry about it being cloud. And there's a bunch of additional bells and whistles that are going to make their way back into the main product as well. The idea is to eventually make them the same product, but right now the advanced bells and whistles were mostly in Advanced Cluster Manager. What were some of the advanced bells and whistles? They had a lot around lifecycle management. So managing the lifecycle of a cluster from its inception to its upgrading and perhaps eventually to its replacement with a new cluster. That was one aspect of it. Another big aspect was compliance and policy. So the idea that you can design a policy and then apply that consistently to a set of clusters. And you can use metadata tagging and labels to determine which policies apply to which clusters. So you could have one set of policies for your dev clusters and then a more stringent set of policies for your production cluster. That makes sense. And you could have those policies consistently applied across 5 or 10 clusters. That's kind of nice. It also handles the upgrade of OpenShift, which allows you to go, okay, I want to upgrade to the next stable release of OpenShift. And it gives you some tools to roll back in case something not so great happens with that upgrade process. Okay, that all makes sense to me. What it sort of reminded me of was what VMware is trying to do with VMware Cloud Foundation, which is this higher level management of multiple components and also management of multiple clusters across. So it's almost like a merge of VCF and what vSphere does. But I think the thing that's still missing for me in the world of VMware is that overarching manager of all your vSphere deployments. And I think Cloud Director was intended for that. But right now, as far as I know, Cloud Director is really only for MSPs. It's very cumbersome and difficult to set up, and I don't believe it has a hosted version. The nice thing about this is if you want to deploy the advanced version of it, you can do that. And the recommendation is to have a dedicated OpenShift cluster just to run the advanced cluster manager. You don't want anything else running on that cluster. It's sort of the same idea of having dedicated ESXi hosts and a dedicated vSphere cluster to run all your vCenter servers. Same sort of idea there. But it's able to go out and then control all your other clusters. And if you go with the hosted option, there's nothing for you to actually deploy. You just have to register your clusters and then manage them from that degree. So it's kind of like what vSphere does, but a little bit of extra sauce on top of that, because when you think about vSphere and vCenter, most of the clusters you're managing are all going to be in the same data center. You can do cross data center, but really you're probably going to deploy a different vCenter in each data center. And then you need some sort of overarching thing to manage all of those. And I think Cloud Foundation was kind of moving that direction, but I'm not sure if they got there. What it did remind me is that there's a lot of lifecycle management things that have been built into vSphere 7 to deal with the lifecycle of your ESXi hosts, of your vCenter, of all the other components that make up vSphere. And in the same regard, a lot of components go into OpenShift and Kubernetes. And being able to manage that lifecycle in a logical and consistent way is becoming much more of an issue. So now you have tools like Advanced Cluster Manager that are intended to handle the lifecycle of everything from the hosts that are running OpenShift all the way up through the API controller and all the various components of Kubernetes. Okay, makes sense. Another thing that they kind of talked about was also kind of taking a page from the VMware world of run any app anywhere. This was like multi-cloud and hybrid are their big thing, and they want you to be able to run your workloads in any cloud, any app, anywhere. And I felt like there was, it's like, I've heard this before, right? This is sort of VMware's mantra, but now Red Hat is also going with the same mantra. And basically they're saying Kubernetes is the consistent platform. OpenShift is that consistent platform that will enable you to run your applications anywhere. And that includes the edge. So they did talk about edge a little bit. And I thought that was an interesting segue for them into the edge to see that this cluster manager is not just for your data center deployed stuff and stuff you deployed in the public cloud providers. There's a good chance that you may end up running OpenShift at the edge in smaller data centers. And if that's the case, or even if it's not OpenShift, if it's just Kubernetes clusters you're running in all these little edge deployments, you're really going to want something that can manage all of those smaller deployments in a consistent fashion. And Lifecycle, the cluster manager, provides that level of consistent management across all these different clusters. So I think there's a lot of things to look at and investigate when it comes to OpenShift Cluster Manager, and it's something that I'd like to dig into more and sort of lab it up a little bit. Fortunately, they do have the hosted version, so it's really easy to get started. You can actually spin up Minishift on your local desktop and then register that up with the hosted version of Cluster Manager, and boom, you're up and running with very little friction. Or you can use their managed deployments in any of the clouds to kind of test it out in the same way. So if you have some credits on Google Cloud or Azure, there's another way to kind of jump in and kick the tires on it. The Advanced Cluster Manager, I think, is in preview right now, so I'm not sure if you can download it directly, but it's something else that I'd like to also look into and compare and contrast with some other providers out there, because I know Rancher has something, Weaveworks has something, Platform 9 does this to a certain degree. So I'm curious how it stacks up against all those other providers. So that's my thoughts for today. That's the end of the daily check-in. Thank you so much for tuning in. Remember, tomorrow's Terraform Tuesday. So if you have questions for me about Terraform, make sure you hit them up in the comments or send me a message via Twitter, Ned1313. Until tomorrow, stay healthy and stay safe. Thanks, everyone.